The heavy, cream-colored termination folder slid across the polished glass desk, propelled by the manicured hand of a man who had never worked a single honest day in his entire life. Bradley Sterling sat back in the sprawling, hand-stitched Italian leather executive chair that had belonged to his legendary father until less than 72 hours ago. An insufferable, razor-sharp grin stretched across his face, his teeth gleaming under the warm recessed lighting of the penthouse office as he adjusted his platinum Rolex with a practiced, theatrical flick of his wrist. "Sign the acknowledgement page on the final line, Lily, and let's make this transition as quiet and painless as humanly possible," Bradley said, his voice a smooth, condescending baritone that dripped with unearned authority. The air in the massive room smelled heavily of expensive Cuban tobacco, rich cedar wood, and the faint, metallic tang of the building's centralized climate control. Through the floor-to-ceiling glass windows behind him, the sprawling corporate skyline of the city stretched out like a glittering kingdom, a kingdom he genuinely believed he now ruled with absolute sovereignty. I stood perfectly still on the plush Persian rug across from his desk, my hands folded loosely over my simple canvas tote bag, my face a mask of absolute, unbothered professionalism. I didn't reach for the heavy gold fountain pen he had ostentatiously tossed onto the glass surface, nor did I allow a single flicker of fear or anger to compromise the calm exterior I had spent a decade refining. "May I ask for the specific operational justification behind this immediate termination, Mr. Sterling?" I asked, my voice smooth, steady, and entirely devoid of the emotional trembling he was so clearly waiting to exploit. Bradley let out a sharp, mocking chuckle, leaning forward and resting his elbows on the desk, his ice-gray eyes gleaming with the sadistic pleasure of a petty tyrant finally unleashing his suppressed malice. "Let's cut through the administrative pleasantries, Lily. The operational justification is that you are an overpaid, lazy, and completely useless remnant of my father's outdated regime," he sneered, tossing a stack of corporate slide decks onto the table. "For 10 years, you've sat in your quiet corner office collecting a massive executive salary, pretending to manage our core infrastructure while my father stroked your ego. A modern, multi-billion-dollar enterprise like OmniLink Logistics cannot expand into the automated digital marketplace while heavily weighted down by administrative deadweight like you." He leaned back again, lacing his fingers behind his head with an intolerable smugness that signaled he believed he had just executed the ultimate corporate power move. He believed I was weak, a soft-spoken woman who had grown complacent over a decade of domestic corporate stability, a helpless employee who would slide into immediate poverty without his family's charity. What Bradley's blinding, monstrous arrogance had completely prevented him from realizing was that he hadn't just cut away a piece of administrative dead weight. He had just severed the single, load-bearing pillar holding the entire structural architecture of his family's multi-billion-dollar global logistics empire together. For 10 long years, while Bradley was bouncing between European beach clubs and collecting vanity degrees funded by his father's trust funds, I was the one building the actual machine. I had spent 18-hour days in the dark, humming depths of our centralized server rooms, writing the highly specialized, proprietary custom code that regulated our entire global transit matrix. I knew every single variable, every hidden API pipeline, and every delicate automation script that connected our Fortune 500 clients to maritime shipping hubs across Tokyo, Rotterdam, and Los Angeles. Our company's founder, Charles Sterling, was a brilliant traditional salesman, but he possessed absolutely zero comprehension of modern, distributed cloud databases or automated customs clearance frameworks. Charles trusted me implicitly, granting me full, unrestricted autonomy to design a custom, proprietary operational network that I affectionately named the AeroGrid Matrix. Because I understood the volatile, predatory nature of the corporate tech world, I had taken a highly specific, completely legal precaution when I originally structured that proprietary software engine. The active enterprise integration keys and global shipping broker validation codes running the AeroGrid Matrix were legally tied directly to my personal, independent federal logistics broker license and private encryption signatures. OmniLink Logistics did not actually own the underlying cryptographic infrastructure of the master software pipeline. They merely possessed a conditional operational lease that was completely dependent on my active status as the designated operations director. The moment Bradley finalized my formal termination paperwork and officially deactivated my corporate user credentials within the human resources system, he would unwittingly trigger an automated, hard revocation of those proprietary licensing keys. By trying to humiliate me and satisfy his fragile childhood insecurities, my boss had just set off a catastrophic digital self-destruct sequence that would freeze his entire global shipping network before the next sunrise. If that is your final decision, Bradley, I will gladly respect the terms of the termination, I said softly, stepping forward and picking up the gold pen with a calm, deliberate grace. I signed the acknowledgement page with a swift, elegant stroke of my wrist, sliding the heavy cream folder back across the polished glass table toward his manicured hands. I will save your security team the trouble of an office escort. My personal belongings have already been compiled and transferred to my private vehicle, I added, offering him a serene, enigmatic smile. Bradley smirked, snatching the signed document up with a triumphant flourish, entirely convinced that he had just solidified his position as the new, undisputed king of OmniLink Logistics. Excellent. Make sure you surrender your building security badge to the front desk reception on your way out, Lily, he muttered, already looking down at his tablet to check his social media feeds. And don't bother applying for a reference letter from this firm. I don't provide professional recommendations for lazy administrative deadweight. I didn't answer his final insult, turning smoothly on my heel and walking out of the penthouse office, the heavy mahogany double doors clicking shut behind me with a muted, profoundly satisfying thud. The walk through the executive floor was quiet, the distant, rhythmic hum of the centralized corporate server room echoing through the polished corridors like the steady heartbeat of a sleeping giant. I passed my lower-level managers and data coordinators, who looked at me with expressions of profound confusion and brewing anxiety as they saw me carrying my simple canvas tote bag toward the express elevators. They already knew that a storm was brewing under Bradley's erratic, chaotic new leadership, but they had no idea that the entire sky was about to collapse on their heads. I took the private elevator down to the underground parking garage, stepping into my vehicle and starting the engine as a clean, overwhelming sense of absolute liberation washed over my entire body. I drove exactly 4 blocks away to the quiet, sunlit balcony of a high-end French cafe, ordering a fresh pot of black coffee and a light breakfast as I pulled out my personal, encrypted tablet computer. The digital clock on my screen read exactly 4:14 p.m., meaning Bradley had been the official head of operations for less than 3 hours. I opened my private holding network interface, monitoring the automated system metrics of the AeroGrid matrix as the OmniLink Human Resources Department officially processed my corporate deactivation codes. At precisely 4:30 p.m., a bright, flashing crimson alert illuminated my tablet screen, indicating that my enterprise user token had been formally deleted from the corporate Active Directory. A millisecond later, the proprietary security protocols embedded deep within the AeroGrid code detected the unauthorized removal of the licensed master guarantor, initiating an immediate, unconditional hard lockout of all external API endpoints. One by one, the connection bars representing our multi-million-dollar international client portals began to turn a sharp, hostile shade of gray, dropping offline like a series of falling dominoes. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my hot coffee, leaning back against the iron chair of the cafe balcony as I watched the digital kingdom Bradley thought he inherited begin its historic, unmitigated descent into absolute chaos. While I was enjoying the crisp evening air, the corporate headquarters of OmniLink Logistics was rapidly transforming into a screaming madhouse of pure, unadulterated panic. Because Bradley's high-priced technical consultants possessed absolutely zero understanding of the underlying cryptographic signatures, they had no idea why the main operational dashboard had suddenly turned completely black. The automated terminal gates at our primary shipping hubs in California and New Jersey instantly locked down, preventing hundreds of massive freight trucks from loading or unloading their high-priority containers. The digital customs clearance manifests for 32 massive maritime cargo vessels currently crossing the Pacific Ocean were instantly invalidated, leaving billions of dollars of high-value freight completely stranded in international waters. Without my active broker validation signatures, the Automated Port Authority networks flagged OmniLink's entire corporate identity as an unverified, high-risk security threat, halting their operations globally. By 6 p.m., the corporate phones at the headquarters were ringing in a chaotic, piercing chorus of absolute fury as the supply chain directors of 5 separate Fortune 500 retail conglomerates demanded immediate answers. These massive corporations stood to lose tens of millions of dollars for every single hour their inventory remained frozen at the ports, and their high-powered legal teams were already drafting catastrophic breach of contract lawsuits. I ignored my personal phone as it began to vibrate aggressively against the table, the caller ID displaying the main corporate switchboard number over and over again in a frantic, desperate rhythm. I powered down the device completely, spent a beautiful, undisturbed evening cooking a gourmet dinner at my apartment, and enjoyed the most profound, deeply restful night of sleep I had experienced in 10 years. When I finally woke up at 9 o'clock the following morning, the sun was streaming through my bedroom windows, casting a warm, golden glow across the peaceful quiet of my living space. I slowly ground some fresh espresso beans, brewed a rich cup of coffee, and leisurely powered on my secondary smartphone, bracing myself for the inevitable onslaught of corporate desperation. The device instantly exploded with an overwhelming cascade of text messages, emergency emails, and exactly 73 missed calls from every single senior board member, vice president, and legal advisor at OmniLink. But the most entertaining notifications came from Bradley Sterling himself, who had sent a series of text messages over the course of the night that perfectly documented the complete, spectacular disintegration of his arrogant mind. The first message, sent at 7 p.m., was sharp and demanding. "Lily, there is a minor technical glitch with the master matrix database. Log into the remote network immediately and fix it." The second message, sent at 10:30 p.m., carried a distinct, aggressive note of rising anxiety. "Lily, pick up your phone right now. The California shipping hub is completely paralyzed and Target Corp is threatening a $50 million lawsuit. This is an order." The final message, sent at 4:15 a.m., was a frantic, ungrammatical screech of pure, unadulterated terror. "Please call me back, Lily. The system says our broker licenses are completely revoked. My father is flying back from Europe right now. Please help me fix this." Before I could even finish reading the final message, the phone began to vibrate violently in my palm once again, the screen displaying Bradley's personal mobile number. I slid the bar to answer, placing the phone calmly against my ear without saying a word, allowing the frantic, chaotic background noise of his executive office to bleed through the line for a few long seconds. "Lily. Oh my God, Lily. Thank God you finally picked up." Bradley's voice burst through the speaker, completely stripped of its rich, baritone smoothness, replaced by a high-pitched, ragged wheeze that carried a palpable, breathless panic. "You need to log into the system right this second, Lily. The entire global network has been completely black for 14 hours. The port authorities have quarantined our ships, and our top 5 clients have officially served us with formal notices of immediate contract termination. The board of directors is holding an emergency meeting right now, and my father is screaming that he's going to strip my inheritance and throw me out of the family if the automated pipelines aren't restored by noon." I leaned back against my kitchen counter, taking a slow, quiet sip of my espresso, letting the silence hang over the line until his frantic, heavy breathing became loud and desperate. "I am terribly sorry to hear that, Bradley, but as you so eloquently pointed out yesterday afternoon, I am merely an overpaid, lazy, and completely useless piece of administrative deadweight," I said, my voice smooth as silk, carrying a chilling, unwavering confidence that made him gasp. "And since my services were terminated effective immediately, I no longer possess the legal corporate authority or the technical credentials to interact with your enterprise networks." No, Lily, please. That was a complete mistake, a total breakdown in communication between myself and the HR department. Bradley sobbed openly, his voice cracking into a sniveling, desperate crawl that was utterly pathetic to witness. I was just trying to establish a baseline of operational efficiency. I didn't mean any of those things. You're the single most valuable asset this company has ever had. I will double your previous executive salary. I will give you a permanent corner suite. I will give you a massive corporate bonus. Anything you want. Just please re-input your broker keys and get the cargo ships moving before my family is completely ruined. I let out a soft, quiet laugh that carried the immense weight of 10 years of silent devotion, late nights, and unappreciated operational brilliance. You still don't understand basic mathematics or corporate law, do you, Bradley? I replied, my tone dropping to an icy, lethal whisper that cut through his rising hysteria like a diamond blade. The Aerogrid Matrix isn't experiencing a technical glitch. The licensing keys were legally revoked because they belong entirely to my private holding company, Nemesis Solutions LLC. You didn't just fire an employee yesterday, you materialistically breached the master operational lease that kept your father's entire logistics network alive. And as of exactly 30 minutes ago, I finalized an ironclad, permanent independent service agreement with Nexus Global, your primary international competitor. The line went completely, horrifyingly dead silent for 5 long seconds, the sound of Bradley's ragged breathing catching in his throat as the full, catastrophic reality of his absolute ruin finally shattered his mind. You transferred the client pipelines to Nexus Global, he whispered, his voice a trembling, hollow shell of pure cognitive dissonance. David Vance from Target Corp and Hiroshi Tanaka from Maritime Pacific called me personally this morning, Bradley, I said smoothly, watching the beautiful morning sun reflect off my kitchen tiles. They were entirely terrified by your sudden, complete operational incompetence, and they were more than happy to transfer their multi-million-dollar logistics portfolios to my new independent division at Nexus Global to protect their holiday shipping volumes. By the time your father's plane touches down at the airport, OmniLink Logistics will have officially lost 84% of its annual recurring revenue, and your primary credit lines will be completely frozen by the commercial banks. Lily, please. You can't do this to my father's legacy. He built this company from nothing. It's our entire family wealth. Bradley screamed, his voice rising to a frantic, hysterical screech as he practically begged for his life over the phone lines. Your father should have taught his entitled son that the person holding the keys to the entire machine deserves basic human respect. Bradley, I said quietly, my voice radiating a profound, unyielding peace. Enjoy your emergency board meeting. I suggest you sit in that expensive Italian leather chair and figure out how to operate a global shipping empire without a single client contract or a single line of operational code to your name. Before he could utter another syllable of his frantic, sniveling plea, I slid the digital button to end the call, permanently disconnecting the line and blocking his corporate number for the rest of eternity. The fallout from that 24-hour period was absolute, a public and historic corporate takedown that sent shockwaves through the entire global logistics sector like a devastating Category 5 hurricane. OmniLink Logistics plummeted into immediate, unrecoverable bankruptcy as their multi-million-dollar lines of credit were instantly revoked by commercial banks terrified of the impending breach of contract lawsuits. The founder, Charles Sterling, arrived at the corporate headquarters only to find his executive floor filled with furious board members and process servers delivering massive federal litigation papers. In a desperate, frantic move to save the family from complete financial destruction, Charles officially fired his own son in front of the remaining staff, stripping Bradley of his unearned titles, his luxury corporate vehicles, and his entire future inheritance. Bradley was escorted out of the building by the exact same security guards he had sought to weaponize against me, his professional reputation so utterly ruined by the highly publicized operational disaster that no executive firm in the country would even look at his resume. He was left with absolutely nothing but a mountain of personal debt and the permanent, crushing realization that his own petty, arrogant ego had destroyed his family's billionaire dynasty in less than a single day. 3 weeks later, I stood inside the stunning, ultra-modern penthouse boardroom of Nexus Global, my hands lightly wrapping around a fresh cup of coffee as the morning sun kissed the floor-to-ceiling glass windows. The air in the room was light, filled with natural air, vibrant green plants, and the genuine, laughing energy of a highly motivated operational team that treated every single worker with profound respect. Arthur Pendleton, the senior institutional board member who had resigned from OmniLink in Pure, discussed the morning after my termination, sat to my right, holding a digital tablet with a warm, triumphant smile. Lily, the restructuring firm handling the bankruptcy liquidation of OmniLink Logistics, just submitted their final, desperate asset surrender forms, Arthur murmured, sliding the screen toward me. They are willing to sell us their entire remaining network of physical cargo hubs, regional fulfillment warehouses, and shipping docks for pennies on the dollar just to satisfy their outstanding bank debts. I reviewed the financial data with the sharp, clinical precision of a woman who now officially owned the entire global infrastructure she had spent a decade quietly building from the shadows. Accept the liquidation terms, Arthur, but ensure that the transition papers contain an ironclad, non-negotiable clause permanently barring any member of the Sterling family from ever holding a single share or entering any facility. I replied evenly. He nodded with an absolute, genuine deference, immediately executing the wire transfers that would officially absorb the final, broken remnants of my former boss's kingdom under my own name. I turned my gaze back to the sprawling harbor below, watching a massive, newly branded Nexus global cargo vessel slide effortlessly out into the deep blue water of the open ocean, its automated tracking lights flashing with perfect, mathematical precision. I had honored my own immense worth and professional intellect not by allowing myself to be minimized by an entitled bully, but by having the silent, enduring resilience to let him drown in the reality of his own toxic entitlement. I stepped away from the window, walking back into the warm, supportive energy of my new executive conference room, ready to lead my team into a flawless, limitless, and completely triumphant tomorrow.